With us in the studio from ARIN Intermediate Unit is the Executive Director of ARIN, Jim Wagner, and Travis Stormer, who is the tech specialist at ARIN and has the perfect name for a day like today. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to have you both with us. Travis, you can grab that microphone and just pull it up if you would. There you go. There you go. You don't have to bend over for it. We're talking about internet connectivity. Broadband connectivity, I guess, is the better way to phrase it here this morning, and ARIN's role in that. And gentlemen, let's bat that around a little bit. It certainly is an issue here in Indiana County and all across western Pennsylvania because we're so rural.
Well, and that ruralness was addressed years ago by both the state and federal governments. Mm-hmm. So ARIN operates what's called a regional wide area network. We call it an RWAN. And that is heavily subsidized by your internet phone bills under what's called the E-rate. We're currently starting our third iteration of the RWAN, and that has provided each of our districts. There's 11 districts in Indiana and Armstrong counties. And so those 11 districts, the two CTCs and ARIN Intermediate Unit, have had fiber or have had internet to all of those districts, and then each of those districts extends that out to their schools. And we've had that in place for going on 12 years, Travis?
Yeah, it's been more than a decade.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when you think about it, with the way that the schools are set up around this area and so many different school districts, as opposed to, say, Armstrong County, which has the single county-wide school district, with some exceptions.
Well, they have 4 districts down there.
Yeah. I guess the Armstrong School District itself is the one that I'm thinking of.
Oh, yeah,
You're
they're
right.
big.
You're right. But that's a whole bunch of different entities that have to be dealt with. And I imagine that each of them has their own technical specialists. And Travis, you deal with them.
Yes, we have meetings with them, and we bring them in a lot of the things we do.
Yeah, and so talk about how that dynamic all works together. It takes a tremendous amount of cooperation, I would think.
It definitely involves a lot of cooperation, and that's been a big part of what we've been doing so far this year, is trying to bring that group together.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about what happens next. What's next down the line for the new generation of RWAN?
So we've been conducting an RFP, a request for proposals, for entities to operate the RWAN. So we are now in contract negotiations with DQE out of Pittsburgh. DQE has been identified as possibly the next operator of the system, and it's pretty exciting for us because operators in the past have leased lines from other entities. DQE, in addition to the extensive fiber that they have in the 2 counties currently, will be laying an additional 52 miles of fiber. And that will be primarily to some of the more rural districts in Indiana County. So this will be the first time, if this process all works out as we hope it will, that the provider will own all of the system. And there are redundancies built into the system going forward, which is significant because that hasn't been there before, and a player the size of DQE is able to provide that. Travis, you want to talk about the size of the pipes that will go into the districts in this new iteration?
For the first time, everybody's going to have the option of going between 1 and 10 gigabit fiber connections to all of our districts, which has never been possible before because of the build-out that DQE is planning to do. And it's going to bring, in addition to speed, it's also a new kind of service agreement we're working with on them in terms of the quality of the network, in terms of the latency, the lag time, and the stability of the connection. And as more and more of the services that schools run are provided by large internet providers like Microsoft and Google and things that are out on the internet rather than locally hosted, those kinds of quality concerns become much more important.
From a family standpoint, away from the school buildings in which the classes are held in the traditional setting, and when we think about distance education becoming such a big part of what is happening, how does this play into all of that?
It doesn't play in as much as people would think.
Or hope.
We have a number of districts who get a service called BrightBytes, and that service, in addition to trying to optimize the technology that's going on within districts, does surveys on a regular basis. So some of our most rural districts, the students and the faculty, parents, they report in the 80% range that they have internet connections. Mm-hmm. But the difference, at least for someone like myself, to make that adjustment to, is they're not concerned about a computer connection. If you think about kids, they all want to do things on their phones.
Yeah.
So a lot of the internet connections that they have are via their phones when they're at home. Mm-hmm. We do have areas in the county. You've probably seen reports in the past of different sites, restaurants and stuff that kids will go and congregate to do homework and stuff that they don't have access. Mm-hmm. So we do know that there are places within the two counties that cell phone connection is either very poor or not available, and those individuals, they still have an issue to deal with.
Yeah, I'd live in that.
Okay.
I'd live with that in Smicksburg. There's practically nothing for us. And we have had school administrators come in and say we have kids who actually drive and sit outside of our school and do all of their work on their phone in their car, sitting there with mom and dad if the kid isn't old enough to drive. And that becomes such a burden on them. And I guess this addresses that.
Right. One of the things that we've tried to do with this new version, we worked with some attorneys and got language in the RFP that indicated that the vendors, we wanted them to consider using this system to leverage it to be able to provide additional internet services to businesses and residences throughout the two counties. Mm-hmm. DQE does have a history of doing business connections. We're not aware at the moment that they have a history of doing residential connections. So at least for some of the businesses along some of these ways that have not had the opportunity to have high-speed broadband, this may be an opportunity going forward to have them connected as well. Yeah. The pipe that we're talking about, we don't have any entity within the 14 entities we discussed earlier that currently is using more than 1 gigabyte. But the pipe going into each of these districts will now be 10 gigabytes, that they're able to adjust that amount of internet that they're getting through that pipe, theoretically even on a monthly basis going forward, that they could do it up or down, make some adjustments. So over the next 5, possibly 10 years that this could go out, there should be no issue in any district or any school having enough broadband available to them to do anything that they need to do within their facilities.
Just a couple of moments left this morning with Jim Wagner and Travis Stormer from ARIN Intermediate Unit. We're talking about broadband availability and how that ARIN is a part of this whole consortium concept. And that consortium concept is very important, isn't it, in terms of pricing and the availability to school districts?
Districts, especially, again, this was started over a dozen years ago. So at that point in time, there may have only been 2 districts, and that would be Indiana and Armstrong, who could even have thought about having internet into their facilities if this service was not available. Mm-hmm. So by having the consortium, having the federal and state governments support it, especially the federal government, for every dollar that it costs, our districts average about 70 cents off of that dollar. And that's available through the E-rate program that we mentioned briefly before. So by having that consortium, and Travis and his team, they handle all the billing to the federal government for that and the rebates. So the consortium has played historically, it could not have been done historically without the consortium.
Jim Wagner, Travis Stormer, thanks so much for coming in. Next step is what? Next ARIN board meeting?
The ARIN board has already approved it conceptually. Now it's out to the districts for approval.
Okay.
And a number of districts have already approved it, and others have it on their agendas upcoming.
Excellent.
So,
excellent.
Okay.
Thank you both for coming in today.
Thank you.
Okay.
We appreciate it. It is the voice of Indiana County.